Welcome back to Black Swan Outdoors, and today we're going to talk about the travel notebook. This video is actually in conjunction with a recent post we posted on Patreon, which we call The Underground, and we started a new series on preparing for working in non-permissive environments. And so the first of the series is talking about kind of how to prepare for going into an area, like a conflict area or an area that might be particularly dangerous. And so some of these tips actually function well for domestic travel, for places around areas, not just kind of classical non-permissive environments, but for different situations that might be particularly dangerous. So, for example, some of these tips can translate well to a family emergency plan. Could translate well to preparing for or mitigating things like domestic violence. So I don't want people to think that these skills are specific to a developing country in conflict or in war. But some of these skills can actually transfer into other areas that can be used in different contexts. So in that the post that we talked about kind of preparing, as I said, and so one of those things is doing research on your country, preparing maps. So we go through kind of in detail some different types of maps that you can prepare on, say, in Google or whatever to get yourself prepared for these areas. And so one of the things that we've been talking about or mentioning in that post is what we call our lifesaver card. We did a video about this before. And basically, it's just a formatted card that you can fill out. Basically, it has just some of the standard information that you would want to have on your person in case you came into some trouble. So certainly, your mobile phone is something that could be stolen from your hotel room. It's targeted for burglary, robbery. Could go run out of batteries when you not need it. And in that case, if you lose your cell phone or access to it, you lose all of your numbers. And how would you have numbers, or how would you call for help if you didn't have your numbers? So that's kind of one of the ideas behind having this. Now, as an alternative, you can just put the basic information right in your notebook. And so what we're suggesting is that you do that right on your first page. So the notebook can be used for other things, of course, through your trip, jotting down notes, navigation notes, observations. Maybe you see, a car a few times and you want to jot down the license plate, or you see some suspicious behavior, whatever it is. Or just for meeting notes for work, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. The idea here is that your first page on your notebook is going to be essentially your lifesaver card. So on here, this template here, we just showed, your name, blood type, medications or medical concerns, your contacts that are supposed to be in your phone that are most important, like your local contact, a spouse, the embassy, for example, local emergency numbers. Not all places, like 911 in the United States or 000. Are going to be the same. So we might, as a good reminder, have that in there. The hotel or place where you're staying, that address and phone number. That's also good for your declaration card as well when you're coming in. Because remember, you're going to have to fill out your declaration card. So having some of these notes in your notebook is going to help you with, again, other things. Doctor, what's the phone number for your doctor, so that someone could call. And then a crisis plan. Very simple, maybe one sentence. What are you going to do in a crisis? Where would you go? Where would you have a rally point out in the front of the hotel or your home? Will you head to the local library? Will you go to the local hospital? Whatever it is. So in this case, it's in a crisis, you will head to your hotel. So that way you kind of thinking about what you will do and kind of where you would go in a bad situation as it comes. So one of the other things is we have other cards, we have other stuff, and so instead of carrying a whole pocket full of different types of cards, we can put that very simply in our notebook. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a notebook. It could be note cards. It could be anything you wanted. In this case, we're using a Write in the Rain notebook, which is kind of a very durable pages, and they're waterproof. So that way you can pull these pages if you wanted. If you didn't want to carry the whole notebook, you can just rip the pages out of the notebook, fold them up, put it in your pocket, and they're going to last most likely for the duration of your trip. Same with something like a note card. You can certainly laminate a note card just the same. That works as well. Or laminate like we did here. This is just a simple piece of paper to kind of protect it. But again, it just to make things simple, there's no need to go into some crazy arts and crafts project. Just write the most important information on in your book. Now, you could also keep a kind of a template in a notebook, or maybe in the last pages of a notebook of what you would write on your first pages. That way you always know what you're going to want to write in terms of your plan. So in this case here, this is a communications plan. I could put this at the very back of my notebook as a template for other trips, and then you just rip out the pages, that after you get them back, that you no longer need. The other alternative would be to carry a SD card or on your phone with a sample template as well. And so we'll have some more posts on that, and we talk about that quite a bit, the travel SD card that you can use and prepare and rely on. So that's also in the post. So in this case, right here in this page is our communications plan. So the communications plan just talks about, how are we going to communicate and while we're traveling. So we go by PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. That's the acronym. So our primary way of communication will be a cell. If cell service doesn't work, we're going to try texting. If texting doesn't work, we'll try maybe a two-way radio. And if that doesn't work, we're going to go with a yellow chem light. So the idea here behind this PACE plan is the primary and alternate are pretty much very similar. They're just going to be an alternate frequency or an alternate means, but it's going to be probably the same device. It doesn't have to be, but it could be. Your contingency, you want it to be completely separate, a separate device. If we're talking about route planning, it's an entirely separate, different route. So in this case, we're using radios because they don't rely on infrastructure like a cell phone does. And then lastly, for our emergency, what we're doing is something that is very analog, very much more primitive, like fire, smoke, light, whistles, or audio signals. Things like that, that's going to be just an extreme emergency. And so in this case, I'm going to use a yellow chem light. And then we can determine what that yellow chem light is going to mean if someone sees that. So at the very top here, with that background, we have for our radio communications, we have set channels. So we have the numbers channels 1 through 4. And the first 3 is our primary channel, our secondary channel, which is going to be, our primary will be a VHF based. Secondary in this example is a UHF based, and then our tertiary goes back to VHF. And so you can say go to channel 1, channel 2, channel 3 in your communications and what you need. And then we have a weather channel, so those that are in the United States for weather in the area, 163.8, whatever, or whatever is your local weather channel. And then finally here we have our pro words and then the definitions of pro words. So on this trip, we're going to use post box as a pro word, meaning going to the rally point. So you could work in a conversation or text. I'm going to head to the post box, and that would mean you're going to your rally point. That way it's not so overt in your communications if you need to speak a little bit more carefully around people. And then if you're in duress, something really bad is happening, you're going to use or work in the word Everest. Or you could just simply text Everest, and that's going to mean, hey, we're going to meet at our post box or the rally point, or whatever that's going to mean. So you want to put in the words, the pro words that you can use, or procedure words, and then the definition, what does that procedure mean? So you can use all sorts of different types of pro words or procedure words. to mean different things. And you want to have that recorded here so that when you have a meeting with your team or your family or whomever, everyone's on the same page in terms of how you're going to communicate, what channels or what phone numbers. You know, if you're not using radios, this could obviously be your phone numbers instead of radio frequencies. This is just an example. Now, and by the way, we do have a card here that we supply here, Black Swan Outdoors, to organize your PACE plan or your communication plan. This one is not laminated. It's actually on contact paper. We did a video on this, and that allows you to be able to write in your communication plan with pencil and erase it and reuse the card. So that's a kind of a handy tip. Okay, so our next page here is very similar to the communications plan. This is the SOI, or Signals Operations Instructions. This is really something only that if you or your family, your team, whomever, your group is using radio communications, then you're going to rely on an SOI. So if your radio communications is your primary, or even if it is your contingency, your Signals Operation Instruction, or SOI, is going to help you walk through basic communications plan or structure. So at the very top, we have our date time group. Okay, so again, this doesn't have to be in the military format, unless you need to, but you're going to have that up there at the top so you know when this was issued. And let's say your protocol is you're going to change your SOI every day or every 2 weeks, or what have you. Then you know this is your latest SOI, and if it's past that expiration date, then you would rip this out, destroy it, whatever, and create another SOI. So in this context, we're going to use a PACE plan. So our primary, alternate, contingency, and then an emergency means of communications. So it's a little redundant to the communication plan. But again, this is radio specific, whereas your communication plan could be based on cell phone conversations, sat phone. Your SOI could be, your primary, and alternate could be kind of an FM or VHF, whereas your contingency could be high frequency. And you can mix and match, again, too, with your communications plan, whereas your SOI is going to be more specific to radio communications. Next up here, we have our search and rescue codes, the SARNEG, and basically what that is a code. We're going to do a video on this sometime in the future, a very quick video, and it's basically just you find a word that's 10 letters long that doesn't repeat. So in this example, aftershock. And then you just write underneath it 1 through 10. And this way, if you need to, over the radio, send a GPS coordinates or a cell phone, anything that's numbered, you can use this as a simple code. And the SARNEG is going to change. It can change with your SOI. And so you would just want to use a list of different 10-letter words. Now, you don't have to do 1 through 10. You can start it at 4 and then go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then start over 1, 2, 3, 4 until you're done. You could jumble it up as well if you wanted to have your own sequence. You could put the sequence of numbers to the letter, to the order in the alphabet, for example, too. If you want to make it even harder. So there's just some options in terms of sending coded numbers, things that you don't want in the clear, people to be able to know your exact position or phone numbers and such. Then our next is our call signs. So we have, we're just making a fictitious name for a team here, Sierra Team call signs. First call sign here is Sierra 6, then Sierra 5, Sierra 10, whatever. And then you just put down the name, whoever that's associated with. And then your TOC or Tactical Operations Command, meaning doghouse is. So when you refer to doghouse, that's your TOC. So the SOI might not apply to everybody, every traveler. However, radios do help in emergency situations. and this could be radios could be easily handed out to individuals as needed, and then you could have a briefing with talking about your SOI, and everyone would just write in their notebooks what that daily SOI or weekly SOI is going to be. Okay, moving on is our evacuation Medevac report. This is, or sometimes called the 9-line, because it has 9 separate lines. Again, this is a product or something that we've created that you can use. I like to keep these in my first aid kits. You can write this out write it out with a pen, and then hand this over, or you could use this as a template when you're communicating to somebody when you're getting help. This is just one format of a medical evac card. This is the military version. Certainly not everything applies in a civilian context, so you can augment this so that it makes better sense. One of the reasons why I would say you could potentially use this, or one of my arguments of why you'd want to use this format, is that if you are traveling and you're relying on assistance from even any NATO military for medical evacuation, that this is a good way to communicate everything that they're going to be used to hearing or expecting. And then from a civilian perspective, it's going to pretty much cover most situations as well. So it might be a little bit more overboard or more information that you would need in the civilian context, but you can omit the lines that you don't feel is pertinent. So it's a good template, I think, and not to make everything, I don't want to try to turn everything into kind of a military, because it's, but you have to think about who is responding in the emergency. Is it going to be a military organization or somebody who has a military experience? And in that way, when you communicate, you're communicating in a way in which they understand. And that's the whole point and purpose when we talk in our book, Guerrilla Radio, about communication, is that you can be technically capable of communicating, but you're not capable of sending your message appropriately. And so that's why we spend a lot of time talking about communications theory as well, so that even though you're tactically proficient, that you're also strategically proficient in your communications, because you could have all the best equipment in the world, but if you can't convey your information effectively, then it's all for naught. So your Medevac card here, again, not necessary for everybody. You could also include here SOAP notes as well, or any kind of other type of medical information that you would want to put in. But you want to think about, okay, worst case scenario, someone gets sick, someone gets hurt. How are we going to communicate, to the hospital, to a medical evac, whatever. Now, we often also don't think from a civilian context about helicopter medical evacuation, but it happens all the time in developed worlds, particularly around, around cities where we rely on helicopters. So that's one reason why in our book on guerrilla medicine, we talk about, how do you set up a landing zone for a helicopter. Now, for those that are working in remote areas, for example, Australia, Africa, then you have the Royal Flying Doctors, and they're using planes, not helicopters, and that's a whole nother thing. So we're going to do a whole nother series on medical evacuations and how to prepare for those on foot, medical, aero, medical, and helicopter as well. So you can be prepared for those eventualities if those happen, and also while you are in your evacuation process. So stay tuned for that post on our Patreon. Next up here is just a spot report, again, military based. Size, activity, location, unit. You see something strange happening in your area, these are the things you want to jot down. Now, it might not be something that you're going to send via text, over phone, or radio. It might be just for your own information. These are the most important things to kind of recall. And then here we have a sit rep. Again, date and time, location, medical status, plan deviation, supply status, equipment status. This is kind of think about this in an emergency, how you want to think about your situation. So even if you're not sending this as a report to somebody, this is how you want to think about this. Think about your situation so that you can adequately communicate that or structure your plan around what you need to structure your plan around, if that makes sense. So spot report, I don't know if that's necessarily important for everybody, but it's certainly something to consider. Again, conflicts are very dynamic. They change, and so as you start seeing things changing on the ground, you can get that to the respective authorities as necessary and give them the most important information that they need. So again, it's about effective communication. Now, finally, here is what's called a sketched strip map. Now, this is a really invaluable way in which you can communicate, giving people directions, and it's handwritten, and that's for purposes. So maybe you have a map, but you need to get your group from point A to point B, but you don't have maps for everybody. This is a great solution that you can hand these out. So everybody's going to evacuate to a particular location, or they need to know where a rally point is in case there's an emergency. Whatever it is, you're going to hand these out. Now, it's really not that much different than, say, something that you would pick up at a hotel, like a tourist map. It's a really kind of stripped down. The idea here is that we're taking away all the information in a general, like, say, topographical map that's non-pertinent and focusing only giving directions through pertinent information. It's also a great way if people don't have a strong capability, map reading capability, that they pretty much anyone can rely on a strip map like this. So in this day and age of Google Maps, there are people, younger people in particular, that have grown up without ever having to learn how to read a paper map. It's not a generational knock. It's just what happens. And so, or we've become more comfortable with Google Maps. And so, handing somebody a paper map is going to be very difficult for them. Could potentially be very difficult for them. Now, certainly a strip map or a tourist map makes it very simple. Pretty much anyone can read something like this, be able to move and navigate through their city with or hopefully without a compass even. Okay, so preparing our strip map takes a little bit of time, but there are some things that you want to make sure that you have in your strip map. One of the most important things is you want to make sure you have your north arrow at the top so they know what direction is north. Second is you want to make sure that you note that this is not to scale, because if I'm starting at one place, here, the starting point, going to my end point, and I decide, oh, you know what, if I cut across here, this is going to be a lot faster. Well, this could be, 50, 60, 70 miles. So if we don't know what the scale is, and we don't have to worry about scale even. So we just want to note that there is no scale. The second point is, or the second thing you want to, or the other thing you want to have on here is that you do want a clear end and beginning. So I have noted my abbreviations. SP is starting point, RP is a release point or end point, and CP is control point, which is just a point of reference. And so starting here, we're going to go all the way up north up to our release point, and then we can use our control points to convey information, to let people know, kind of orient themselves. These could be break spots, whatever, or just key places where there might be, say, turning or features. You want to include, if you can, your mileage. You can just do your total mileage so people know the length of the journey, kind of they can plan and know what to expect. In this case, what I did was I broke down each control point for the mileage. So 11 kilometers to control point 1 from your starting point, 6 kilometers to control point 2, and so on. Total journey distance is 24 kilometers. so that, again, people can prepare. Now, along the route, I'm going to have different key features that they're going to look for. This is how people think. Some people think in terms of spatial recognition by the features around them. So if you just say, hey, head north, they might not have any idea of what you're talking about. But you could say, oh, go to the gas station on Highway 11, and they'll know exactly what you're talking about. So that's why we want to kind of put these features in here. So as we're traveling down our journey, or traveling down our route from our journey, they are going to go north to Highway 11, right to that gas station. The gas station happens to have water, so we're going to note that. That might be something important. If they don't have water, don't have food, on this map here, as you can see, we have a cache site. So along the route, we have resupply, where we could have food, water, whatever. So it's cache site alpha is what we're calling it. And then they could look that up in different notes of what that means, what's in that cache, and we'll do a whole thing on caches. We do talk about that in Guerrilla Medicine, too, in that book in detail. So next up here is along the route, we have, there's a bridge, so they know, okay, hey, there's going to be a left-hand turn after you cross the bridge. So we have that control point is that intersection. The bridge is a reference. Then as they're going through, if they're heading west, they're going to be going through a town. So we're going to note the name of that town so they know, hey, if we're going into Shapville, oh yeah, we know that we're on the right track. And then again, another control point at an intersection, and Spirit Road, and they get right up to their release point. So they'll know that it's 4 kilometers from Highway 20 to their release point or end point. So that's just a basic strip map. One of the neat things about these two is you don't have to handwrite them. You can use Google Maps to create your own strip map. If there's requests for it, I'd be happy to do a video on how to make a strip map. And if there's interest in some of the prep maps as well, I could certainly do that. But I would encourage you to check out our Patreon post to get a better idea of how to kind of set up your travel. If there's other things that people might put in a travel notebook, please put that down in the comments down below. If they have any suggestions or things that could help improve this, I'd greatly appreciate it. And again, thanks for your likes and subscribes, and stay tuned for more videos.